Hello, chums. Welcome back to another day of BLA1. That would be British Language Arts with Mr. Williamson. So, in terms of class time, it's going to be pretty similar to what we did yesterday. So, we're going to take you really quickly through it. I'm actually going to start with the quote of the day, not the daily objective. So, our quote of the day comes from. I, I can't do it, guys. Every time I try to stay British, it just somehow in the middle of my sentence switches to Big Tony. I can't keep it. I'm getting mad. So you know what, everybody? We got that British guy out of here. Today is Big Tony. He's back with ya. If you remember from yesterday, our quote of the day comes from a Miss Margaret Heffernan. She said one time. She said it one time. Everybody, calm down. She said one time, "You cannot fix a problem that you refuse to acknowledge." So that's what our boy Ralph is trying to do. Our Ralphie boy here, Pony Boy, some might call him. He's trying to fix some problems on the island, which brings us to our daily objective. It's the daily objective for the second time. Normally, I don't like doing things two times. Normally, it's one time for Big Tony, but today we're going to do it twice, okay? The objective is I can explain what Ralph observes about the civilization the boys have created and how he tries to resolve it. So we're going to get to the end of this assembly time today, and you're going to tell me, is the problem solved? Are they not? Was he successful? I don't know. You know, Big Tony would have been. I don't know about old Ralphie boy, though. All right, everybody. So go ahead and open up your books to page 84. I can't do that anymore. Sorry. Go ahead and get out your Lord of the Flies novel. Open to page 84. If you don't have that done, go ahead and pause and do that now. Okay, so why is it important? I'm going to ask you to go back in the book, look at some things. If you don't have your book, you can't do that. Also, when you read with me, you get better at reading. So do that with me today. Our focus for these pages that we're going to read together. What was Ralph's purpose in calling the assembly? We talked about this yesterday, but what is his purpose in calling this assembly? And at the end of this, I want you to be able to tell me, is he successful in refocusing the boys? So they have all these problems on the island. And you guys just read about the last problem, which is that the boys are all afraid. They're afraid of this beastie thing, this idea, this monster that was kind of created. So they're all scared of it. And so he has all this list of things they need to fix and the fear. So I need you to tell me at the end, do you think that the boys are ready to start going in the right track, or is it going to get worse? So if you remember, both Jack and Piggy step up to try to calm the little one's fears of this beastie thing. Jack insults them, calls them sissies, says you guys should just get over the fear. Piggy tries to tell them that it's unscientific and that it's not true. And then right where you guys left off, a little one steps up to kind of talk, to respond to what Ralph, Jack, and Piggy have been telling them about how there is no beast thing. So we're starting at the little ones began to jabber about 3/4 of the way down the page. The little ones began to jabber among themselves. Then one stood forward. "What's your name?" "Phil." For a little one, he was self-confident, holding out his hand, cradling the conch as Ralph did, looking around at them to collect their attention before he spoke. "Last night I had a dream, a horrid dream, fighting with things. I was outside the shelter by myself, fighting with things, those twisty things in the trees." He paused, and the other little ones laughed in horrified sympathy. "Then I was frightened and I woke up. And I was outside the shelter by myself in the dark, and the twisty things had gone away." The vivid horror of this, so possible and so nakedly terrifying, held them all silent. The child's voice went piping on from behind the white conch. "And I was frightened and started to call out for Ralph, and then I saw something moving among the trees, something big and horrid." He paused, half frightened by the recollection, yet proud of the sensation he was creating. "This was a nightmare," said Ralph. He was walking in his sleep. The assembly murmured in subdued agreement. The little one shook his head stubbornly. "I was asleep when the twisty things were fighting, and when they went away, I was awake. And I saw something big and horrid moving in the trees." Ralph held out his hand for the conch, and the little one sat down. "You were asleep. There wasn't anyone there. How could anyone be wandering about in the forest at night? Did anyone go out? There was a long pause while the assembly grinned at the thought of anyone going out in the darkness. Then Simon stood up and Ralph looked at him in astonishment. You? What were you mucking about in the dark for? Simon grabbed the conch convulsively. I wanted to go to a place I know. What place? Just a place I know. A place in the jungle. He hesitated. Jack settled the question for them with the contempt in his voice that could sound so funny and so final. He was taken short. With a feeling of humiliation on Simon's behalf, Ralph took back the conch, looking Simon sternly in the face as he did so. Well, don't do it again. Understand? Not at night. There's enough silly talk about beasts without the little one seeing you gliding about like the derisive laughter that Rose had fear in it and condemnation. Simon opened his mouth to speak, but Ralph had the conch, so he backed to his seat. When the assembly was silent, Ralph turned to Piggy. Well, Piggy, there was another one. Him. The little ones pushed Percival forward, then left him by himself. He stood knee-deep in the central grass, looking at his hidden feet, trying to pretend he was in a tent. Ralph remembered another small boy who had stood like this, and he flinched away from the memory. He had pushed the thought down and out of sight, where only some positive reminder like this could bring it to the surface. So Ralph and Piggy in the scene are trying not to remember something, or they try not to talk about something that happened earlier. See if you can pick up on what that is. There had been no further numberings of the little ones, partly because there was no means of ensuring that all of them were accounted for, and partly because Ralph knew the answer to at least one question Piggy had asked on the mountaintop. There were little boys, fair, dark, freckled, and all dirty, but their faces were all dreadfully free of major blemishes. No one had seen the mulberry-colored birthmark again. But that time Piggy had coaxed and bullied, tactfully admitting that he remembered the unmentionable. Ralph nodded to Piggy. So we're going to reread this passage really quickly and answer some questions about it. There had been no further numbering of the little ones, partly because there was no means of ensuring that all of them were accounted for, and partly because Ralph knew the answer to at least one question Piggy had asked on the mountaintop. There were little boys, fair, dark, freckled, and all dirty, but their faces were all dreadfully free of major blemishes. No one had seen the mulberry-colored birthmark again, but that time Piggy had coaxed and bullied, tactfully admitting that he remembered the unmentionable. Ralph nodded to Piggy. So my first question to you is, why did Ralph and Piggy stop numbering the little ones? So they used to keep track of them by numbering them, but they stopped doing that. There's actually two reasons why they stopped doing it. If you could tell me one of the reasons why they stopped numbering them. So there were the two reasons. One is because they just genuinely couldn't keep track of all of them, so there was kind of no point. They didn't have a good system to actually keep track of them. And the second reason was because the boy with the mulberry-colored birthmark, he was there earlier. If you remember when the fire broke out on the island and it burned a big part of the jungle, the boy with a mulberry birthmark on his face, he was down where the fire was, and they have not seen him since. So they don't number the boys, and they don't want to talk about it. So now my second question to you. Why did the author, knowing what I just told you, why did the author refer to the little ones' faces as dreadfully free of major blemishes? So normally being free of blemishes, that's like marks on your face. It could be acne, it could be freckles, something. Normally being free of blemishes might be considered a good thing. But he said dreadfully, like they're painfully free of major blemishes. Why does the author say that? He's saying that to refer to the fact that they're blemish-free when there's no blemishes. It acknowledges that the boy with the face birthmark, so maybe that could be referred to as a blemish, the birthmark on his face, had not been seen. So they actually wanted to see one kid with a blemish on his face, but they're sad because there is no one with a blemish on their face. That boy with the birthmark is gone. Okay, so continuing at go on, ask him, about 3/4 of the way down the page. Go on, ask him. Piggy knelt holding the conch. Now then, what's your name? The small boy twisted away into his tent. Piggy turned helplessly to Ralph, who spoke sharply. What's your name? Tormented by the silence and the refusal of the assembly, broke into a chant. What's your name? What's your name? Quiet! Ralph peered at the child in the twilight. Now tell us, what's your name? Percy Wimmies Madison, the Vicarage, Harcourt Street, Anthony Hance, telephone, As if this information was rooted far down in the springs of sorrow, the little one wept. His face puckered, the tears leapt from his eyes. His mouth opened till they could see a square black hole. At first he was a silent effigy of sorrow, but then the lamentation rose out of him, loud and sustained as the conch. Shut up, you! Shut up! Percy Wimmies Madison would not shut up. A spring had been tapped, far beyond the reach of authority or even physical intimidation. The crying went on, breath after breath, and seemed to sustain him upright as if he were nailed to it. Shut up! Shut up! For now the little ones were no longer silent. They were reminded of their personal sorrows, and perhaps felt themselves to share in a sorrow that was universal. They began to cry in sympathy, two of them almost as loud as Percival. Maurice saved them. He cried out, "Look at me!" He pretended to fall over. He rubbed his rump and sat on the twister so that he fell in the grass. He clowned badly, but Percival and the others noticed and sniffed and laughed. Presently, they were all laughing so absurdly that the big uns joined in. Jack was the first to make himself heard. He had not got the conch, and thus spoke against the rules, but nobody minded. And what about the beast? Something strange was happening to Percival. He yawned and staggered, so that Jack seized and shook him. Where does the beast live? Percival sagged in Jack's grip. That's a clever beast, said Piggy, jeering, if it can hide on this island. Jack's been everywhere. Where could a beast live? Beast my foot. Percival muttered something, and the assembly laughed again. Ralph leaned forward. What does he say? Jack listened to Percival's answer and then let go of him. Percival, released, surrounded by the comfortable presence of humans, fell in the long grass and went to sleep. He passed out. Jack cleared his throat, then reported casually. He says the beast comes out of the sea. The last laugh died away. Ralph turned involuntarily, a black, humped figure against the lagoon. The assembly looked with him, considered the vast stretches of water, the high sea beyond, unknown indigo of infinite possibility, heard silently, though sough and whisper from the reef. Maurice spoke so loudly that they jumped. Daddy said they haven't found all the animals in the sea yet. Argument started again. Ralph held out the glimmering conch, and Maurice took it obediently. The meeting subsided. I mean, when Jack says you can be frightened because people are frightened, anyway, that's all right. But when he says there's only pigs on this island, I expect he's right, but he doesn't know. Not really. Not certainly, I mean. Maurice took a breath. My daddy says there's things, what'd you call them, that make ink? Squids? That are hundreds of yards long and eat whole whales. He paused again and laughed gaily. I don't believe in the beast, of course. As Piggy says, life's scientific, but we don't know, do we? Not certainly. I mean, someone shouted. A squid couldn't come up out of the water. Couldn't! In a moment, the platform was full of arguing, gesticulating shadows. To Ralph, seated, this seemed the breaking up of sanity. Fear, beasts, no general agreement that the fire was all important. And when one tried to get the thing straight, the argument sheared off, bringing up fresh, unpleasant matter. So the last two questions, rereading this passage. At the beginning of the chapter, Ralph thinks to himself, there must be no mistake about this assembly, no chasing imaginary. So in other words, this meeting is to set things straight. By the end, on page 88, Ralph observes a breaking up of sanity. So question one. Just to recall, with these details in mind, what was Ralph's goal for calling an assembly? If you remember, his goal was to set things straight about where they used the bathroom, refilling water, keeping the fire going, and not being afraid of the beast. That was kind of his goal, is to make these things all start working better. Second question then, was Ralph successful in talking about these things with the boys and figuring them out? So in your opinion, after reading this, was he successful in getting the boys to set these things straight and making them better? It seems as if the boys are even more chaotic and disorganized now, so I strongly would probably say no.